Hello and welcome, everybody. I'm so excited to be joined this morning with the lovely Kelly Vardakis. Welcome, Kelly.
Thank you for having me.
For those of you that aren't familiar with Kelly, I want to just dive into introducing her because we have this really great conversation that we have planned for you all today. So for those of you that aren't familiar with Kelly and her work, she's a fertility care practitioner and she's been teaching the method since 2013. She has experienced infertility, endometriosis, threatened miscarriage, and postpartum depression. And now her specialty is helping women overcome these obstacles like she has. As a practitioner, she's honored to work with women and couples on their journey toward fertility awareness at every stage, from a young woman's first period or before through menopause and everything in between. Welcome, Kelly. I'm so excited to be joined with you today.
Thank you. Thank you. It's so good to be here.
Thank you. Well, let's just dive into a little bit about your story. And I'm curious, what came first? Learning to become a great model practitioner, or was it your own journey that brought you to wanting to become a practitioner?
So the story is kind of interesting. I actually saw this presentation when I was a junior in college, and I was really intrigued by the whole presentation because I never knew that there were so many intricacies in terms of health and fertility. But I thought that it was simplified and explained in a way that was very understandable. So I loved it. And I had this thought to myself during the presentation, like, I really would love to teach this one day. But then I finished college, and then toward the end of, I graduated and I ended up meeting my husband. So I was like, oh, I know, we can use natural family planning. And I've seen this presentation for Creighton and I loved it. And so we did that. But I had always had extremely painful periods and symptoms of endometriosis from probably the very start of my first period. And because of just not knowing the different signs and symptoms, nothing was ever done about it. And for all of the different doctors that I went to, just searching for answers, I could never find one that was satisfactory. The recommendation was always just to take the pill or just to deal with it. And, it's normal, and nothing about it was normal. So, a few years into marriage and a few years after charting my cycle, Dr. Nolte opened up the Gianna Center in New York City. And I was so excited to finally know that there was someone who would understand what I was saying. And I had information to bring to her. And in that first appointment with her, she said to me, I think you might have something called endometriosis. I had never heard of it before. It sounded very scary. And also that there was a possibility that I would struggle with infertility if I did have it and if I didn't get it taken care of. So she had recommended a surgical consult, and I was really nervous about that. And so I didn't go right away. And I wish that I had, because I feel like after having suffered for so long, that healing was there for me, but I didn't know how powerful that could be.
Wow. Yeah, definitely. So what were some of the things that she saw on your chart that made her think that it was endo?
The most important thing that she said to me was, because when we looked at every part of my cycle and just discussed, there was some limited mucus. There was maybe a shorter post-peak phase, which indicated the possible low progesterone, which I did have, which can be very common in women with endometriosis. But also the bleeding was very heavy. It was often brown, and my periods were often so painful that they were like, I was just completely out of commission, but I always pushed through. But it was like that dreaded 4 or 5 days during the cycle that I knew that I would just be incredibly uncomfortable if we were on vacation, or if I was traveling somewhere, if I had an event, or, it always was terrible, terrible. Sometimes to the point the pain was so bad that my ears would ring. And I remember it getting to that point one time and saying, I had already met with Dr. Nolte, and I was like, I will do anything not to have to suffer like this again. I just have to go for the surgery. So what ended up happening was, I had an event, and it was like around 4:30 in the morning, and I woke up and thought I had appendicitis. The pain was so bad and so excruciating. I said to my husband, you've got to take me to the ER. And prior to that, we had been kind of trying to conceive and it just wasn't happening. So we went to the emergency room and it turned out that I had a cyst on my ovary that was very big and possibly had like ruptured or something twisted. They didn't really give me the information that I needed because they're not overly familiar with this. So they recommended I do a follow-up with an OBGYN. And so when I contacted Dr. Nolte, she sent me for an MRI and it turns out they couldn't quite determine what kind of a cyst it was. So she said, really, this has to be surgically removed because we want to make sure that it's not something serious like cancer. So that was what kind of pushed me to go and have surgery. And at that time, Dr. Biter was practicing in New Jersey. I loved him. He was so good and just such an incredible surgeon. And I went in for surgery with the intention of removing that cyst, whatever it is, with a biopsy. And he said if he went in and there was endometriosis, he would take care of it in there. So it turns out my surgery would have been like 45 minutes. It ended up being about 4.5 hours. And I had stage 3 endo.
Wow.
So that cyst ended up being an endometrioma. That's what it
Mm.
was. So that was around the time of, it was a lot of suffering because there was a lot of uncertainty. And I remember waking up from surgery and thinking, because, when you go into surgery, there's always worst case scenario presented to you, and all the different possibilities and options. And I remember saying to my husband, do I still have everything? Am I going to be able to be a mom? Is there a chance? And he said to me, don't worry, everything's still intact, but you had a lot of endometriosis all over your abdominal cavity.
Mm.
So, but it was around that time in that healing period, kind of then trying to really look at what the hormone levels were and see how the chart could really be adjusted after getting the help that I needed, that I was praying. I was at mass one evening with my husband and I felt in my heart the Lord say to me that I desire to work with married couples, that through this journey, there was something really special and there was a lot of healing and, you know, brokenness that could be addressed. And I wanted in some way to be a part of that. And I heard the Lord say, like, yes, that will come. The next day, I got an email from the Sisters of Life that there was the Creighton Model Practitioner Program being offered about an hour away from me. So I
Oh,
signed up and that was how I became a practitioner. It like, you would say like it fell in my lap, but it really was the Lord. Um, and at that time, it was an experience to go through that training in the midst of this diagnosis and infertility and uncertainty and that longing. Am I ever going to be a mom? I would see pregnant women all over, friends and family having baby showers. And here I am, like, I'm so broken and I'm so, is this going to be possible? So I had been seeing women that were pregnant, family, friends, going to baby showers. And every time it would be this pain, because here I am trying to recover and heal and understand. And also the emotion of how could I have been going through this for so long and nobody recognized it and nobody could heal it and nobody could put their finger on it. But then here comes along Creighton and my NAPRO who are like, oh, yes, this makes sense. You have these symptoms. And so, as hard as it was to go through the training to become a practitioner during that time where I'm kind of trying to put all these things together, it was healing in the sense that I knew that it was because of what I went through that I would be able to now share with so many women what kind of care I received. So after I completed the first part of my practitioner training, I conceived. And that was something that was very, very powerful. And it was, again, like after that time of great longing and pain and suffering. And it really was so profound to have the support of my NAPRO, who was able to say to me from the minute I had my first positive pregnancy test that she would walk with me and watch this baby grow inside of me. Um, so there was just so much joy and um, a feeling of like peace and answered prayer. Um, but then when I went back for my second part of the practitioner training, there was other women who were there who were also struggling with infertility. And then you wrestle with like, why them and why me? And how does this all come together? But I'm really believing that during that time, it was a total lesson in the trust of God, in trusting in God,
Mhm.
and knowing that He has a plan and there's a reason why sometimes we carry these heavy crosses, because it'll lead us to, in many ways, our mission. What is God calling me to do? And I found that over and over where women have said to me, um, finally, I feel like I'm being heard. Finally, this symptom that I have, it's telling me something that I knew, like I knew it was telling me something, but I didn't know what. So that has been incredibly rewarding, to say that your body speaks a language and we can understand it and we can interpret it and we can, the symptoms that we have point to a deeper reality that something might not be right. And we can find out what it is, have a woman get a diagnosis, and then help her on the journey to healing.
Yeah, for sure. 100%. I love that so much. And I think whether it's learning to, chart and be able to make like what seems to be in the course of your day, like very small,
Mhm.
perhaps slightly insignificant observations, but it
Mhm.
tells us so much about our fertility. But it is starting to learn that language of the body, right? And we can translate that to other areas, right? Like
Mhm.
how's my energy? How do I feel
Mhm.
in the morning when I wake up? How,
Mhm.
are these like basic functions that should be working optimally? And we so often ignore them. And going back to your endo journey too, right? Like the pain, like how much pain do we have to suffer through until we finally say enough's enough? Like I need to
Right.
know more about what's going on here. And I think
Mhm.
that this is I really believe it's an attack on women, from the evil one, this like disassociation with who we are physically and who we are mentally, and perhaps even who we are spiritually. And we
Mhm.
have to like reunite these things to be able to realize that God-given mission, right? And that very much is a part of what I hear in your journey. It's
Yeah.
that reconciliation with my body's not broken. I can
Mhm.
actually, we can work with my body, we can
Mhm.
fix, repair, right? But it
Mhm.
wasn't broken. It wasn't
Right.
something that I just wasn't given.
Mhm.
And then also that like that mindset piece of how to handle walking
Right.
alongside, accompanying women that are fertile, when we're in a stage of infertility or
Yeah.
whatever it is we're carrying. Like we have to bring that back together. And I
Mhm.
love to ask women in these conversations, and I feel like you just hit the nail on the head, Kelly,
Mhm.
how you were fertile during your time of infertility. And that's exactly why what you said is exactly why I asked that question, because I believe that the Lord can take those deepest wounds and hurts that we
Mhm.
carry in such a vulnerable time and place and show us that great
Mhm.
mission that He has
Yeah.
planned for each and every one of us on our hearts. And I love that
Yeah.
you spoke to that. Thank you.
That's beautiful.
So,
And that's
how,
one of the things, sorry to interrupt you. That's one of the things that
you're
I
good.
always say too, is that women really deserve better. And not just
Mhm.
because they deserve better, but because they are made in the image and likeness of God and have a certain dignity and a certain role as women. And that care and that attention, women are deserving of that rather than just slapping a pill on, the
Mhm.
problem, which is the answer so
Yeah.
often. And it just
Yeah.
doesn't speak to their dignity.
Yeah, definitely. So let's talk for a minute about how can we get ahead of infertility, or even, if we have like young girls that are, we're parenting and bringing them up, and we want to be sure that they're able to preserve and protect their fertility. How are some ways that we can do that?
When I work with my clients, so often I hear them say, I wish that I knew this earlier, or my mom. In terms of getting ahead of infertility or getting ahead of issues, I think that that old adage, knowledge is power, is very true. giving a woman, even at a very young age, the tools to be able to understand what we call the language of her body, and to know why she's having symptoms or signs is very important. And I'll give you an example of that. One day I was teaching an engaged session for couples preparing for marriage. And I did a brief intro session and talked a little bit about the different phases of fertility. And one of the women at the end of the presentation came up to me and she said to me, wow, cervical mucus, I've had it. And all these years, I thought there was something wrong with me, but now I know that my body is working exactly the way that it should. And that was so profound to me because, after you're teaching for a while, these things are just, you talk about them and they're kind of like just language that you're very familiar with. But for this woman, it was very eye-opening for her. And I remember for myself as a young girl, like I didn't know why I was having these different phases or these different PMS symptoms, or why I had cramping, or why I was emotional at certain times in my cycle. So just allowing a young woman to look at information and understand why she's feeling or a certain way or seeing certain things, I think is, like I said, very empowering for her. But then also, as we know, our charts can reflect different biomarkers that we look at very thoroughly. And if we have signs of a possible underlying condition, they can be addressed much earlier on. And something like endometriosis can be progressive in the sense that it can spread and grow and create more of a possibility of infertility the longer that you have it. So for a young woman to be able to identify that this is possibly something that she has and make maybe changes in her diet and lifestyle, or, even have surgery.
All right. So, Kelly, tell me a bit about what you're working on right now.
So because I've been told this so many times, like I wish I knew this earlier, or my mom never told me this information, I always found it interesting that women, the first thing that they did was say their mom didn't have this information. So I'm working on a program. It's called Truth Body Goodness, and it is for specifically moms of tweens and teens that will give them all of the information that they need to confidently have this conversation with their daughter. Even give them some basic charting tools, some affirmations to encourage girls to really recognize that they are made in the image and likeness of God, that their bodies are good, trying to help them build self-confidence in a healthy way, to look at just some of their lifestyle habits. How can moms and daughters eat healthy together? How can they take a walk together just for the movement and the connection that just being out and spending time together can bring? Going into specifics, so many women in our circles may already know a lot about the body, but just giving them the information and how to present it to their daughters.
That's so much. And I think it's so important for us as moms to have other resources, even if we already know it, right? Even if the mom she's been charting her cycles for years, but to have an external voice telling our daughters the same things, right? To reinforce for us what we want them to learn and have it be from a different person.
Yes, I agree. And I myself right now have a newly turned 10-year-old daughter. So it kind of also came out of that, like, how am I going to communicate this beautiful information with her? And really, this is one of the most important conversations I am ever going to have with my daughter. So how can I do that well and with the support and clarity that I need? So that is my hope for other moms, that they would just have an opportunity to also express their concerns or questions or challenges and work through them with the support of other like-minded moms.
Yeah, beautiful. I love it so much. So Kelly, how can my listeners find you?
So my website is wonderfullymadefertilitycare.com. And I would love to have visits to my website, and there's opportunities there to connect with me that way.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time today, Kelly, and sharing
Thank
your
you, Rita.
story. This has been so good. For those of you listening that are wondering, wanting some help or additional support in how to move forward in your own health journey, I have an ebook called When Is It Time to Break Up with Your Doctor? And it does dive into some of the things Kelly and I were talking about today, how you can support your body if you feel like you've run up against a brick wall and your doctor's maybe not advocating and supporting you in the way that you need to be seen and heard. Grab my ebook. It's got lots of great tips for how to move forward through that situation. So thank you again so much, Kelly, for your time today. And I hope you all have a great day.
Thank you, Rita.